Arsenal achieving everything they can at the moment, but will they get their hands on the trophy come the end of the season? With me and Wright here in the studio, Karen Carney and Natalie Gedra, and it's what is now becoming a bit of a tradition. It's the Ian Wright celebration to the third goal.
you don't have to show it. You know, it was all over by now.
We will anyway.
Oh, what a goal.
What?
This is a rout, by the
An
way.
exhibition!
You enjoying your football at the moment?
Honestly, it's brilliant. It's brilliant because the guys they're doing it, they're getting it done, and they're doing it in the way that Mikel wants us to play. And, you know, it's nice to see people playing well in the formation, you know, because that's what you've got to do, because otherwise people close you down. If you're not playing well, you give the ball away in certain areas. I didn't think Fulham were very good, simply because they weren't closing us down. They didn't know what they were doing, so they played into our hands. And you can't do that with Arsenal at the moment.
No, they crumbled a bit, didn't they, in the later stages of the game? Maybe not even the later stages, the later stages of the first half, maybe. Yeah. But when you look at Arsenal, the way this season has panned out for them, and the hurdles in terms of too small a squad to cope with an injury, then they get a major injury, they get past that. This is going to be really difficult for them. They've got a period where for a few weeks Manchester City play first. Will they cope with the pressure if City can get closer to them? Will they cope with Manchester City beating them at the Emirates? And each time, it seems so far, they've been able to get over that hurdle.
Yeah, and you know what? The manager, there's no excuses. He just keeps going. There's a belief within him, and he's cold. He just wants keep pushing. And I think was it that in the training ground, there's an empty piece waiting for the Premier League. Someone was saying, and you know, Mikel Arteta, when you obviously walking past that every day, and he's going there, driving the club, driving the culture, you can see why there's no excuses and why those little bumps that we keep going, that's a bump. They just keep getting over it, no problem. And you know, against Fulham have been doing well, you know, overachieving perhaps some people might say, but nevertheless, they're up there and been doing well. It was seamless against them. They absolutely turned them over. The style, the intensity, some of the football they were playing. If you're going to go and watch a team perform, it would be Arsenal at the moment, and with brilliant young players and a great manager as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, Natalie. They're doing it in style. They're exciting to watch.
No, definitely. And the problems, the hurdles that came up in the way, they really turned into a lemonade. It's impressive because not only they found solutions, they found different ways to attack. And now with Trossard, of course, there was the transfer window and they did really well with Trossard. But they found this way. I remember the Leicester match when he first played with Trossard and Martinelli and Saka, and speaking to Martinelli afterwards, and he was like, oh no, that really works because it's a reference that he had already with Gabriel Jesus, and Arteta saw that in Trossard, and now they have a good problem because Gabriel is coming back, but now they have different ways to attack. They had a problem, and not only they found a solution, they found other solutions as well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Trossard, or do you want to talk about the return of Jesus? Which are you more excited about?
I think you have to mention Trossard because of the fact that he came in when he came in, and remember he wasn't even the first choice, which has really fallen into our lap. But he's somebody that came in and he's ready to go. And from the first game to now, he's just got better and better at what he's doing. Because, like I say, with Gabriel, with Martinelli, I think that what happened with him and Eddie...
You can't say Gabriel because there's three of them.
with Gabby Martinelli. I think that you saw with him and Eddie, as much as Eddie came in and he kind of plugged that gap for a bit, scored some goals, and it got us to the next phase. What was happening is people started to work us out a bit. Because what we found, we've isolated on that left. When you look at Saka, he's got Ben White coming round, he's got Martin Odegaard coming across, but then you've got Zinchenko maybe too far from Gabby. Gabby's up there on his own. By the time the ball gets across there, Kaz, he's like two players and he's trying to take them on, whereas when Jesus is playing, they swap, they move around, and Trossard does the same. They swap and move around, and you look at the goals that Gabby scored recently as well, and Trossard, they're both in the middle of the goal when they're scoring their goals. So that's something that's come back, which Jesus will then bring back even more, because that's what he does. Very aggressive, hard runner, hard worker, interchanging spaces. It's very exciting now because, like you mentioned, Kels, people talking about when he's gone, what they're going to do when he goes, and kind of dealt with it, and now he's back. So we should be very excited about that.
Yeah, on Trossard, he's got a hat-trick when he was playing for Brighton against Liverpool, got a hat-trick of assists in this game for Arsenal against Fulham, and he's enjoying this one, nearly as much. But it is... I think what Natalie was saying about the fact that players can come in and slot into a particular position is maybe what's keeping the wheels running smoothly in this Arsenal team.
No, definitely. And it's been interesting to see the solutions because you see a team that's hungry for titles, that's clearly very angry. They really want to win this thing. So they are willing to find the solutions, to do different things. And we're always talking about the passion because, it's been 20 years and the passion and the emotional wins. Arsenal won yesterday against Fulham. They won like Man City was winning a couple of seasons ago. You know, they were just ruthless. Yeah. It was a parade. It was just, and it was Fulham. When I watched when I saw the fixture list, I was like, Fulham away. I don't know. It's tricky. It's a tricky one. And they made it look easy. And that's winning like a champion as well, because you always think about the big wins, the last minute goal and just fighting until the end. But that's winning like a champion too, because Man City did it for a couple of seasons playing like that. And now Arsenal also shows this type of maturity. You
know what you have to look at, there's a pattern emerging with Arsenal, is how they start and when they score the first goal. When they score the first goal, they do go on to really control and finish the game off. And I think that's what happened. It happened at Leicester as well, even though they didn't go on and smash it. Leicester didn't have a shot on target. And when you look at what happened with Villa, when you concede the first goal, Arsenal, when you see what happened at Everton, when you see Bournemouth, it gets frantic. It gets frantic. And that's what, at the start of the season, Arsenal was doing. That was scoring first and they were really blasting teams. And it's almost like that's their superpower and you can't get back at them. And I feel that at the moment, it's very exciting because we need to make sure that we do score that first goal, because I don't want to go through Bournemouth again for a start. It was too much. And then they scored again. It wasn't fun. But that's what I'm trying to see, if people are going to try and see if they can close us down in that respect and kind of not let Arsenal start that fast, so as they can try and quell the intensity.
But interesting that the team that fell apart in this game was Fulham, who actually have made control a sort of watchword for themselves this season. They have been quite disciplined and organised.
Palhinha. Missed him last two games and the performances have not been of the levels that you expect. And, he's one of the most Premier League tackles, off the ball, brilliant. Willian wasn't available as well. It just shows that their squad, it is thin, but you need those main players, your 11. And once you take a little bit of a cog out of that system, it kind of falls apart. And the difference when Thomas Partey's involved in midfield and you haven't got Palhinha to get tight to him or get a tackle in or make it hard, Arsenal playing really attractive football and then someone comes in like Palhinha and wins the ball back, kind of ruffles the feathers, but he wasn't there. And the impact that he's had, and obviously now there's a lot of clubs linked with him because they've seen how good he is off the ball. I think that was a big miss, but they have looked a little bit out of sorts without him.
Yeah, and that's what allowed Arsenal to perform as well as they did, at least in part, in that game. And almost, as Natalie was saying, reminiscent of Manchester City when they've been at their very best. When you look at the title race, even though Manchester City got the win against Crystal Palace at the weekend, they don't seem to be in full flow at the moment. And they were able to do it, and they could put the pressure on Arsenal. They know they've still got to play Arsenal later on in the season in a few weeks' time. But in terms of their own performances, they're not quite there. Do we say Manchester City are stuttering, or do we say Manchester City are finding a way to win even without playing well?
Finding a way to win. And I'm sure they'll be disappointed because they want to put that 10-game run and what we know that they can do. And I think they've been obviously trying to do that. But it's not quite worked out for them because there's something not as fluid and it's not as smooth as they would like it to be. But again, you look at the game against Palace, it wasn't like they were opening Palace up all over the place. In the end, they got the penalty and they scored the penalty because they found a way to win. But it is, for me, if I'm a Man City fan, I am a little bit worried about the fact that we're not beating teams, beat them, and how we used to beat them. Because you look at the Newcastle game a couple of weeks ago, they could have easily lost that game. And that's where Man City are at the moment. They feel a little bit open. It's not as fluid, and they can be got at. But it depends on who's brave enough to try and go for them. And this is why I'm so disappointed for Palace. But we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about it now if you want. Well, we'll talk more in detail about Palace. But in terms of, we'll part that and do that one later. But we'll talk about the Manchester City performance and the way that they've looked unconvincing. And we always have to caveat anything we say about Manchester City by saying, compared to Manchester City's own high levels. But they haven't looked as though it's clicking quite as well as it has done. And it did take a penalty. It took one really bad error from Crystal Palace to allow Manchester City to win that game.
Yeah, and that's why you'd be frustrated if you're Crystal Palace. You stay in there, you need the result, you need that point. But it's just those moments in a game. But I think we started off speaking about Arsenal, and I think right there you mentioned about the fluidity of the front three. And I'm going to go back to Manchester City. Erling Haaland is obviously phenomenal. I'm not criticising what he's done in the Premier League because his goals stand for himself. But the fluidity of bringing in a recognised centre forward maybe is a contributor that the other players, their stats are a little bit lower in terms of goals, and it's not quite working, even though they're grinding out results. So it's really hard to kind of be a bit critical, if you know what I'm saying, because he's doing really well and they're getting the results, but they're not as fluid. And I think that change in style maybe being with the number 9. The last few seasons it's been a false 9, a 10, kind of going like you mentioned about how Arsenal, they're going roam. And I think that's been something they've maybe had to find a way to adapt to, and maybe while they're not as fluid as we've seen previously with the high levels that you mentioned, Kelly.
It's interesting because you think about Gabriel Jesus perhaps being used at times in that position at Manchester City, and then it doesn't quite work out for him there. He doesn't get the appearances that he would want to. He ends up at Arsenal, where his return is seen as the boost they need in the run into the end of the season.
Yeah, no, and at Man City, it started to work better for Gabriel Jesus when he started playing open, right wing, and in Man City just didn't feel right there as a striker, center forward. And when you see Haaland, when you're at the ground, he's always pointing to the spaces he can attack. You see the frustration, and you see the frustration of the players around him. And we were talking about solutions and alternatives. And City, they were always really good at reading the game and finding the spaces inside their way of playing. And now you don't see, it's like, it almost is like they were more independent. And now you see Pep all the time going like this. Well, open the game. And you don't see them just having this proactive side that made them such a difficult team to figure out, because in a way, they were very predictable. They play like Man City, but nobody could stop that. And now they can't find that gear anymore.
You know what? You look at Erling Haaland and the way he scored his goals when you saw him scoring them for Dortmund, and he doesn't score many of those for City, because Dortmund, they got the ball, they want if the line was, and they got the ball into him instantly. City, you're still looking at a lot of these goals and they're in the box. So there's still a lot of that guy that's not being unlocked. Now, you're hoping maybe for Man City's sake that it's because they're trying to find a way to get it to work and that. So next season and seasons after, maybe it will come to fruition. But at the moment, they've not found a way to unlock what he really does. And that is, like you say, Natalie, running onto things, going through and finishing them. We're seeing him in the box, on the back post, heading it in, tapping it in. And he still needs to be unlocked for me.
Yeah, and there's still more to come from a player who's got 28 goals in the Premier League so far this season. But there's always room for improvement, and he says himself he's always learning.
No, but I wouldn't say that him from a learning point of view. I think from the team's point of view to play to his strengths, which is running onto it once he's broken the line of the last defenders and going in and finishing with his left foot like we've seen him do.
And the final thing is his air game. I can't get around the fact that a guy that's so big is not like the strongest header in the world. It just makes me so frustrated. But then I remember, 33 goals in 34 matches.
Yeah, we can't complain.
Yeah. He knows what he's doing.
You know?
He knows what he's doing. So look, he's way ahead in terms of the top scorer, but we're getting now to the nervy end of the season. And, there's two ways of looking at this. Manchester City obviously have the experience. They know what's needed. In seasons before, in 2018-19, they went on a 14-match winning run at the end of the season. They've got, 11 matches to play now. But Pep Guardiola has said, well, the fact that we're back-to-back title winners sort of means that Arsenal have got a bit more in the tank and they can go and get these 93rd, 96th, 98-minute winners. And that's probably where they've got a bit of an advantage. Is that do you think he believes it, or do you think he's saying it to put doubt in Arsenal minds?
Probably saying it to put doubt, because the fact that you've done it twice back to back, then you should know exactly how to deal with this terrain, this road. You've been down it so many times. And of course, Arsenal haven't been down it for many, many years. But what we're seeing is that they're dealing with each bump in the road, like we've mentioned, as it comes. And this is what, when I hear anything from inside Arsenal, they're literally not looking past the next game. You know, Pep will say those things, and he's got to say those things because at this stage of the season, and you look at those games, they're all going to be tough games. There's nothing there you could say is not going to be tough. And even before, if this was before and we saw the Fulham up there, we'd say, well, Fulham's not going to be easy. Palace is not going to be easy. None of them are easy at this stage of the season for both of those teams. So, of course, Pep's going to say stuff to put something in your mind so you're thinking about something other than the job at hand, which is something that you'd expect him to do. I don't mind it, but I like the way that they're dealing with every scenario at the minute.
And having had quite a few times over the last few weeks, Arsenal have been the team that played second. They're looking to kind of respond
even more pressure
to what City have done. But now Arsenal have got a chance to pull further ahead if they can get the results against Palace, against Leeds, when Manchester City are in FA Cup action, and then I think Arsenal play first the next weekend.
It's in their hands.
Is that a big positive for Arsenal? Does it make much of a difference?
Well, it will. It's a big positive if you get the result.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
It's only and I say that, and I don't say it demeaningly. I don't say it in a demeaning way. I'm just saying simply because it's an opportunity to put more pressure across a team that have done it back-to-back twice. So they know what it's like to deal with that pressure. So then give it to them. Because like I heard Pep say in his interview, it doesn't matter about the past, he said, and what you've done in the past. It's what's happening now. So give them the pressure now and see if this team, with the way they're playing, can deal with it. And so it's up to Arsenal to try and win those games to put the pressure on them.
I think as well, though, you're right to flip it back to everyone else, but if they win those games that they have, I still think internally, do you remember I was on here and saying, okay, do they actually believe themselves? Can they do it? I think if you get those games and you see the gap, I think even more so this team's going, something's happening here, something's happening at the Emirates, something's happening on the men's side, the women's, something's really positive shift is happening at that football club. And I think for them then it's we can do this. The belief, and I think that will even shift more in their favour. And there's a genuine buzz there. Like, you know it better than anyone, but there is such a feel-good factor around that football club, and if they keep doing that, it's theirs, man. They've got to take it.
But even from a City point of view, if they're sort of looking at the table, and OK, Arsenal may have played a couple of games more, but suddenly the gap just looks big and it looks difficult, and it just maybe can play into that, particularly when Guardiola has also said, I think my time at Manchester City or any success that I have at Manchester City will be judged purely on whether I win the Champions League. They've got Leipzig in midweek. It's 1-1 from the first leg. And then it's about where their heads are, where their focus is as well.
It's whether you see that gap and you think, oh, I'm tired.
There's
a lot going on. It's a big, it's whether they can flip that mindset. Because
you want Arsenal to think, Kaz. You want Arsenal to win those games and let their minds flip onto, okay, let's concentrate on the Champions League, because the way City are playing, and you saw it again, like I said, I mentioned Newcastle, I saw it against Palace, they can be got at. So if you're getting yourself 8 points clear of games, and then they've got to worry about the Champions League as well, then you're kind of making them, to a certain extent, say, we're going to have to choose one of these, you know what I mean? So hopefully they'll choose the Champions League. But like,
I'm just thinking back to the days of Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger. And I'm imagining if this was Arsenal out in front there and Fergie was chasing, you just know that, whichever way around it was, the other one would come out and say, they've got a lot of games, they're probably going to be quite tired. And just start to put that in the
Ferguson said it. He said, well, we'll see what happens, because, they've got to win all of their games.
And Pep knows really well how dangerous it is when a team is in, I don't know how many wins in a row. He always said that it's easier to win when you're winning. So it's all part of the game. I love it.
And the way they're winning, and
and the relationship they have. So if anybody knows how to get into the other one's mind, and even though we don't see it in the same way that we used to, that's still going on a subtle level, isn't it?
Absolutely, will be going on,
and we are here for it.
Yeah, we're absolutely here for it. And it's something that even when we played, and their kind of hug after the game was kind of weird. It was kind of weird. I said, yeah, but they're mates.
They're really
Hi.
You're actually stopping me from doing my